Among the endless list of things that have been done to this truck, one of them is an Eaton transmission swap, specifically a 10-speed, because I kept breaking the 5-speed. It wasn't that I was really abusing it, it just kept breaking different things in it and got tired of it. Plus I really wanted lower gears to begin with anyway, so I figured I would make a short video, and well, short is in probably 10 or 15 minutes, and I'd list all the part numbers for everything that I can think of that I've used on this. So if your truck already has a 5-speed, and depending on what model transmission you have, this is a FRO series transmission. It's a metric transmission. The sensor for the reverse switch, I had to get a new one. You can see the part number right there. It's actually the same as the 5-speed plug. This truck was originally an automatic, and that you can buy that pigtail and splice it into the original harness. But anyway, so on the adapter plate, can't hardly see up in there. Oh yeah, you can. Right up in there. There it goes. It has to focus. You can see the top of... hang on, let me get a flash. Anyway, I figured I should make this before I put all the panels and stuff back on, because this was running and driving. I just didn't have the 4-wheel drive finished. And it's been about a year since I've done this, and I've put like 3,000 miles on it. Anyway, there you can see the air solenoid. There's plenty of room between that and the top of the patch. Now this truck does have the equivalent of like a 1-inch or 1 1/4 inch body lift, but it's kind of hard to see. There it goes. You can see the top 2 bolts of the bell housing I cut off on the transmission side, because they were especially hitting the cab where that hump is for the blend door actuator or whatever that is. But Jesus. But I think you really only have to cut off one. But underneath the truck we got, you can see the bell housing and all that stuff. There's the starter. Now up there on the bell housing for the motor part, or the adapter plate I should say, the starter or the rear motor mounts bolt onto this, so there's ears sticking out that you got to grind and cut off, and it's quite a bit of a pain, but you get it done. Now, every Eaton swap I've ever seen, they use the it's got the mechanical arm up here, and that's fine, but with this metric Eaton, and probably some others, I managed to find one that originally had a slave cylinder that would bolt right here. Well, this particular transmission had this cooler right here, and I will never get it hot enough to use this cooler. So unfortunately, because of this transmission that I got that was literally from a junk truck for like 300 bucks, which was the cheapest thing of the entire setup, I had to make my own bracket, and I don't have it painted because I wanted to be sure it worked. But this is the heavy duty slave cylinder from the 5-speed. It has to be the heavy duty one because it's a whole lot harder than the original, and you can change this fitting. I'll have that in the description as well. I need to pry that back and put a little grease on there. It looks like it's kind of dry, but I used a self-adjusting clutch, so I don't have to mess with that. That starter is pretty cheap off eBay. I was probably going to buy another one just in case. Now, what was super annoying is the threads that were for the starter, they bolted in. The last 1/4 inch, they got hard all of a sudden, and these bolts were only like 1 inch long, maybe 1.25 inches long. They weren't super long, but when I pulled it out, it pulled the threads. So that was the only one that I had problems with it not bolting up properly, was the starter. So I would probably run a tap through the starter housing, or maybe all of it, which would just be 3/8, because now you can see this one is not really in there right, and the other, I think the other two are fine, but for sure this one, and I think maybe that one, I don't remember, I'm gonna have to tap to 10mm now, which isn't a big deal, but it's annoying because it's all brand new. So for the cross member, we took, and what I should have done was I should have bent this 1-inch Schedule 80 pipe at more of an aggressive angle, or maybe even kinked it, and I should have tied it in to right here for this plate. And I may cut these zip ties that have this hose on here, and I may still weld this, but this is the original cross member. I had to cut a hole. Didn't really have to cut a hole, I could have ground it, but I cut a hole right here for this bolt to clear. I will note that this is an SAE 2 bell housing. If you get a number 3, I think you'll have even more room, but the problem with number 3s is it's kind of hard to find the right adapter plate that goes to the transmission for whatever you need, and plus I needed one that had this hydraulic slave cylinder deal. So on the other side, my welds aren't the greatest because I literally did almost all this upside down, but original cross member mount, that's welded on there. There's a piece of flat bar across the top, and this is welded at the bottom. The other side's factory. So we move over to the transmission mount, and it's the original 5-speed mount, and you can see the one that I made for the transmission, again, not painted, made out of scrap metal. And then we go from, I had to get a smaller yoke for the transmission, which wasn't a big deal, thankfully they had one. Then I had to get a slip yoke, then to a 1550 series U-joint, to this adapter, because this is a Ford 205 transfer case, and this is the original type flange for the Dodge. And then I have pieces of Schedule 80 1-inch pipe bent over that have angle iron welded to them, and they bolt to the mounts for the transfer case. You can see the rubber isolators. But my original anti-rotation mount wasn't very good, so I quickly cobbled this one together, and yes, that looks like absolute shit, and it will probably get cut off and redone someday, but not right now because it works fine. But you can buy this mount off eBay. It's just the rear torque arm mount or something. And then, since I had to get a flange anyway for that and the rear end, because the rear end was wore out, the holes were almost stripped on 2 of them. I went and got a 1480 series U-joint, and I had that drive shaft made by Tom Woods, so I have a little bit bigger U-joints than factory, and they work pretty good. I mean, there's the traction bars, I haven't tried them out yet, but for the exhaust, you can see it's tight right there. It's actually touching the transmission and the cross member, but I mean, get over it, I guess. See what else. Obviously, you have to have the air compressor. So, did the relays and all that BS under the hood, and I have the air running in some plastic conduit. This is the regulator that I'm using now because I used a cheap one first, and this stuff is for the Jake brake and whatever else, but I'm just going to make a little plate that will bolt right there into those screw holes, and all this stuff will bolt to it, this will bolt to it, and I'll flip the carpet back on. I have a lot, not too much, but I have a decent amount of lead sheeting on places laid over it and pop riveted on. You can see the trans tunnel mount or cover I should say. I had to cobble up a little bit of there, and it's going to get seam sealed eventually whenever I get it put back in, later today or whenever. But that's pretty much all of that. The transfer case, I don't know if you was to make the cover, I don't know if you would have enough room to get in the rod for the transfer case over, because it was pretty close, because it was originally about this far off the transmission. And you could go up a little bit more, but it'd be pretty difficult too. And the whole reason I used nut inserts is so it was removable, because for the backup camera for the double DIN head unit, I had to replace this sensor because the wires, it had a different one in it and the wires were broke, and this one happened to be the same as the 5-speed, and I need to pull that forward a little bit. That's just fuel hose, but either way, that's all that. I do have a Jake brake, which doesn't look like much, but I got to make a little flapper. There's the bushings, and that's for a later date. But here's the air compressor. I have it all the way in the back of the truck because I couldn't figure out a good way to mount it under the truck without getting mud flung up on it really bad. So here is the Vire compressor. You can see it's just welded on to the bumper hitch and sits on a plate. That's it. Nothing too much. And then it's got the wires for the, oh yeah, that's one's a backup light, the other one's license plate lights, and one's the air hose just covered in this shielding or this conduit stuff, and the other one is wires. There's a lot of touching up and piddly stuff I need to do to this to make it a little bit better and cleaner, and clean up my stupid 18-year-old self rigging, because I was too broke to fix it properly for a lot of stuff whenever I originally got this truck, and I had small problems here and there. But because I had to move the exhaust, I did have to kind of bend that. Now I do have a different turbo. This is a HE351 from a 3rd gen truck, but still same deal. There's more of that lead. I was going to basically make a diaper for the valve cover. I just haven't done it yet, so it's just sitting on there. But not really too complicated. The worst part is finding all of the part numbers and stuff, so I'll put that in the description, because there's a guy that did a really good job, much better or cleaner looking than what I did, but he didn't have part numbers and stuff, so we'll put that on there. And I apologize in advance because this is going to be kind of shaky. The camera might flip back and forth because of me turning the phone sideways from being upside down and whatever else, but oh well, it's a video and it's really helpful if you're trying to do one of these. You do have to change the yoke if you get a metric Eaton as well, and you have to end up changing the yoke. There is the part number for the yoke that I had to use. I'm not sure which one's the part number. I guess it's probably this one, but either way, that's it. And you can pretty well figure out how big of a hole you're gonna have to cut, and keep in mind that this was originally like an inch lower because it was touching and it vibrated on the cab really bad, and it was super annoying. So I cut some, I think it was 2-inch round stock, and basically did a very small body lift, and my fan shroud was already broken, so I just snipped the bottom of it off. It's fine, but that's pretty much it. Not the cleanest Eaton swap, but it works. It works fine. I don't have any complaints about it. It's just a little noisy. On top of the lead sheet, I have, which will be going in it later today when I put this stuff back in the cab, later today or tomorrow. I have 100 square foot of, well, 100 square foot of mess, what I really have. But this is called mass loaded vinyl, and it does about a third as good of a job as that lead sheet, and it's about the same thickness or a little thicker maybe. But this is $200 for 100 square foot, and that stuff comes in rolls that is 1 foot by 2 foot for $33. Now it does do a lot better job, but it's expensive. That I'd probably have like $1,000 or more in lead sheet to get that much square footage, and so I can put 3 times as much of that down for much less and probably still have some left over. So that's pretty much it. Ignore the fact that it looks like Detroit or East St. Louis in here with this stuff on jack stands. That I'm doing long arms as well, making some, but that's pretty much it. Hopefully this is somewhat helpful, because I had to do a lot of looking around, and I found some helpful stuff, and I found some part numbers here and there, but I never found anywhere where there was a complete list of part numbers, such as what I'm getting ready to give on this. So hopefully that is helpful. If you do a 6-speed or 5-speed, you're going to have to cut the cross member and lower it. All the 10 speeds, 13, hell, even 18s. I don't know why you'd want that much. I could see the 13 because there is one that has a double overdrive. So you have an overdrive that has a little bit less gearing than what the factory 5-speed in this is. And there's one gear that's higher. So it'd be nice, but it's not really worth having the extra gears. Don't really need it, because I never really ever use first or second. I pretty much just use third, fourth, and fifth. I might use second if I gotta take off somewhere, or I'll use first if I'm stuck and I gotta pull it out with a tractor. But hopefully this is helpful, because it would have helped me a lot whenever I was doing it. But oh well, live and learn, figure it out, I guess. And got a lot left to do to make it 100%. It's been 99, 95% for a long time, so we'll get back to it then. And I would like to mention that this truck is a newer truck, so it does not have the speed sensor in the transfer case. If you end up having one of those trucks, basically I think most of the 12 valves were like that, you'll have to get an adapter to go from the mechanical output of the 205, which is blocked off on mine, to the Dodge output. But my speed sensor's in the rear end, so everything still works, cruise control and whatever else. But that's pretty much it. That's everything I can think of, and everything that I do, and the struggles and stuff I had to do. I guess you don't really have to cut quite this much out, but I put this in with a cherry picker, and I actually had it, obviously this is how far it slid back to put in, and I really needed to cut just a little bit more, but I got it in there because I opened the doors, put a cherry picker in here, picked it up through the floor, and rolled the truck in forwards and backwards and got it pushed in, because obviously I don't have a transmission jack that can hold this big of a transmission. So the last thing is, as well, the shifter, because everything's pretty much in its place. It's not perfectly there, but it's close to back where it's supposed to be. That panel's got to go on the other side, but shifter is right where this sensor is for the reverse, which is a problem. On top of that, even if it wasn't there, it would still hit it by a lot, because there's on top of the transmission, so there's, I don't know, needs probably 2 inches taller just to be able to clear that originally. And the whole reason I did the body lift was because, one, it was vibrating on the cab because there was a spot or two touching, and two, it sagged the coils down in the front. And these are 3-inch suspension coils, and it sagged them down. Ignore that, I gotta finish that up whenever I do the long arms. But it sagged them down, so to pick it back up, I either would have to buy new 4-inch lift suspension coils. I didn't want to get rid of perfectly good coils, so I just did a cheap body lift out of some round stock that I had, and you got rid of the transmission vibrating on stuff as well. But what I'm going to have to do here is, I've measured it, and I'm going to put 3 inches total higher, and that'll put me like up in here. And on top of that, this used to come pretty straight off, and you can see I've bent the absolute tar out of it so it's further away from the transmission, but it's there. I will have to bend this farther back because it's pretty much going to hit my dash now, and it really will hit the dash after I put the shift knob back on it. So that's something to be aware of as well, and not really a big deal. I expected it. I was just really hoping I wasn't going to have to do it.